Welcome to a new type of conversation. With each episode, we'll meet with inspiring people sharing best practices at the forefront of creating change for our young people. We'll talk motivations that make a difference and how their lived experience can help empower us to take action and make a difference in the lives of young people where we live. My name is CJ Sturmer, and this is the Champions for Youth podcast. How do we use social media in a way that actually reaches people and leads to creating real change? Not just awareness, but a connection that builds trust and creates sustainable impact. Today, I'm sitting down with Jennifer Anderson, registered dietitian, founder of Kids Eat in Color, and one of the most trusted online influencers for families trying to change the way their kids relate to nutritious foods and overcome picky eating. She's followed by millions who are looking for not just tips, but content they can relate to. We talk about how her background in public health gave her the tools, but it was her lived experience as a parent that gave her the voice. What started out as evidence-based education quickly evolved when she realized data alone isn't enough. If we want to reach families, we have to meet them right where they are, in those moments when they're scrolling, when they're stressed, and searching for support. We dive into how she uses short-form storytelling to build trust, why content doesn't have to be complicated to be effective, and what it really means to lead with empathy, especially when talking to parents who feel overwhelmed and are doing the best they can with what they have. This episode is about how short-form ideas can turn into long-term change for our youth-centered programs and the parents they serve. Let's start creating. Jennifer, thanks so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So Jennifer, you have this amazing career in nutrition. You have a great education, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
So I had just finished my Master's of Science degree in public health. I knew so many best practices. I'd also just finished my dietetics certificate work. So I knew a lot about nutrition and child feeding. And boy, was I so prepared. And so when I started my dietetic internship and I did my rotations at WIC, I gotten to the point of where they were letting me meet with moms by myself. And I remember this mom coming in and she's telling me her daughter's a picky eater. And I was like, do you eat together? She was like, well, no, not really. And so I'm thinking, oh my gosh, the research shows eating together with your child is one of the best things you can do to help them if they are a picky eater. So I start to essentially share that with her. Well, if you can find a time where you can eat with her together, it's going to be so helpful. And all of a sudden I realize her eyes are welling up with tears. She has got a tear streaking down her face. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have seriously messed up here. I hadn't asked her any questions. I hadn't asked her what was dinner time like or why she didn't eat dinner with her family, and find out that she was working, that she was a single mom, that it literally was not possible for her to eat dinner with her child. And here I am totally disempowering her. Of course, there's so many tools to feeding your child, not only eating dinner with your family. And here I am giving her the one that is giving her the biggest guilt trip and really ultimately disempowering her. And of course, I walked it back and tried to fix it as much as I could, but you can't take something like that back.
Do you find that during that time, and even as you've gone up into the point of accidentally creating Kids Eat in Color, that there was just all these best practices and all these templates and things that we should be doing? Did you find that those you felt were always trying to just box people in and trying to paint everyone as this everyone category?
Yeah, I think so. And I think we have to differentiate between public health recommendations and what we read in research, and individual recommendations and what we live as people. So when we're doing research, we're looking at groups of people. What happens if more children eat vegetables because they did not have the TV on? That's one thing. But that doesn't mean in that study itself that every child ate more vegetables when the TV was off. That study, every study is also going to show, hey, there's some kids who ate more vegetables when the TV was on, but less of those. So as a public health recommendation, I can't recommend turn the TV on to get your child to eat more vegetables, because in the study it showed 80% of the kids ate more vegetables when the TV was off. But there was also that 20% that ate more. So at the public health level, I'm going to stand there and I'm going to confidently say, this is going to help you get your child eating more vegetables if you turn the TV off. But I also know in the back of my mind that it's not going to help those 20% of kids. They're actually going to eat less vegetables. That's what public health recommendations are. what are the recommendations that we're going to put out there on the big level that are going to help the most people? But on the ground, in reality, we have to give more allowance to parents for their own circumstances, for who their child is, because that child feeding research may not actually apply to their child. And then we also have to just acknowledge the limitations of research, which is, let's say their child is neurodivergent or their child is minority ethnicity or whatever, you name it. Those kids may never have been in this study.
Right.
It might have changed had that been different. So I think we need to keep those differences in mind, because when we get so tied up in the best practices at the public health level, we forget that people are real and that people have different circumstances, and that research may actually not apply to them and may make their situation worse.
That's a really good point. People try to paint with one broad stroke on this canvas to create this idea of what a big picture should look like, when in reality, there are a lot of colors that go into creating an image, right? It's like to your point. And that color is something that I think within your content has really sort of benefited you. And you have started this incredible organization called Kids Eat in Color. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. And how did you get here?
It really started as I was standing in the pediatrician's office with my amazing, chubby little baby. And she said, he's not gaining weight. And I was floored. That was like the moment that everything changed for me. I suddenly had to become concerned about his weight and his growth. And it began several years of worrying about keeping him on the growth chart, high calorie diets, all of that stuff. And a couple years later, fast forward, I'm standing in the kitchen. I'm making him this adorable little cute bento lunch that he would take. And because it was cute and interesting and novel, he would sit down and eat it. Sending that to preschool with him. Meanwhile, my second son had been born. He was showing beginning signs of being an extreme picky eater. So lucky for him, I'd already ramped up my child feeding skills with my first kid. So he just got ramped right into it. And that was where it started. And I thought to myself, as I was standing there with that little lunch, I cannot be the only parent struggling feeding my kids. And a couple months later, I started an Instagram page. I posted little pictures of those bento lunches that I was sending with a caption of like why I did what I did, just to help another parent. I'm like, I actually spend time learning about this stuff. There's plenty of other parents who don't have time or know how to know some of these child feeding things. Maybe I can help another parent out. And within a year and a half, I had 10,000 followers and I learned, oh my gosh, I am not alone at all. And now, of course, today with millions of followers, I have no doubt in my mind that we struggle with this as parents.
Right. And so you started creating this content and just almost by accident, it's like, well, I'm just going to start taking photos and videos of what's working for me. Like, talk to me a little bit more about that content. Was it because it was working for your child and you just wanted to share that experience?
I think I wanted to be heard. I think that was part of it. It was not just for other people. It was also like, I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be alone in this. This is really hard for me. I'm putting a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of angst, a lot of sleepless nights into helping my child eat what they need to thrive. And I can't be the only one. Right? It's that like, I really don't want to be alone with this. So part of it was wanting to find a community of other parents, but also realizing, hey, I might have something to give. I might have something to offer parents, and we can all kind of be in this boat together. I wanted it as much as other people wanted it. I think that gave all of my efforts a little more authenticity because it was because it's true. It's like, this is the reality. I'm here because I am you, right? And we need help together on this.
Did you find that as you started sharing that experience, you did build this community? I mean, you now have millions of followers, right?
Some people call me an influencer. I've literally had people just think I like sit and write Instagram posts all day, and that's what I do, and that's my job. I'm like, no.
It's a lot bigger than that.
Yeah, it's a lot bigger than that. Of course, that's where it started, but yeah.
Right. You don't wake up one day and brush your hair and say, today I'm going to be the best nutritionist influencer I can possibly be. That's not really how it happens.
No, when I very first started, I don't know that I had actually heard the term influencer. When I started an Instagram account, I just started it. Like that was it. I didn't have an account and then I opened one.
You're a real person at the end of the day.
Oh gosh. Yeah. There is nothing doctored in my images.
What you see is what you get. I'm going to put that on my dating profile. So did you find that you were getting this feedback from other parents of, oh my gosh, me too. Wait a second. This also works for me.
Yes.
Was that common for you?
Constantly. And that's what I got addicted to. It went from just a hobby into like, okay, what products can I create that will actually help parents solve the problems that they have so that I can also support my family and quit my day job?
Right.
Because I can't do both of these. And my day job is not feeding my soul in the way that this is.
I think a lot of people could probably relate to that. So that you had this passion project turned hobby turned now full-time job. How did it get from being an online persona and creating this community to now we need to develop programs to actually be able to help people?
I'm sitting there, I'm thinking I need to create this business. I need to turn this into a business. I had kind of experimented with sponsorships and partnering with some brands that really aligned with my values and what I thought would be helpful to my community. I created a program for the parents of picky eaters because I was like, now it's time for those parents who are really struggling to systematically go through something that they would then be able to learn therapeutic techniques, everything going on behind the scenes with their child so that they can actually make progress, potentially avoid feeding therapy or even do it alongside therapy or if feeding therapy didn't work. And so I created that program initially. And then I also created a meal plan because I had a kid who was going into school for the first time requiring a lunch and 2 snacks that I had to pack every day.
Wow.
I was starting this business, which meant I was still doing 2 jobs, right? Like the chaos of feeding a family. And I was like, how am I going to meal plan and cook for my family in this context? This is nuts. Like, I can't do this. And so I sat down put on my dietitian hat. I was like, okay, I'm going to make this meal plan for my family. I'm going to put everything together. And on a whim, I just Saturday morning put something on Instagram. I was like, hey, is this something that would be helpful to you? And a huge portion of my audience was like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what we're looking for. Rather than just making a meal plan for my family, I made it a meal plan for everybody, for Kids Eat Color. That was really the product that enabled me to quit my job, support my family, and kind of move forward with Kids Eat Color. And people are like, you just kind of made this thing. It's like, no, I use this thing.
So you're creating this content and finding is that it's really short bursts, right? It's designed to be really digestive, almost repetitive in some ways. So you have, it's not like this long 30-minute recipe that you're posting. Tell me a little bit more of the type of content and how you're finding that people are actually relating to this and finding it useful.
I think a great example is where we've come from and where we are now. And so when I started my first program, it was a live 1 to 2 hour, session where I was talking to parents. And, we had 4 of those over the course of a month. And people's feedback was, this is too long. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. The next year, I made it smaller. And now we have 20-minute sections of information. And people were like, oh, this is too long. And so over time, those chunks of information have really stood out against what has worked really well in social media, which is small pieces of information that are dripped out over time, whether it's a static post, which is what all of my feed was when I started Instagram, to now videos. Our attention span has gotten so much shorter. And so often we're thinking about education, about a handout that takes, 5-10 minutes to read.
Yeah, sometimes it's just so many words.
Yeah, so many words, that's too many words. And we think, let's make a, 15-minute video. Now, YouTube is interesting. YouTube can somehow suck people in for 15 minutes if they're a YouTube sort of person. But if they're a Instagram, TikTok, Facebook sort of person, you're not going to get them for 15 minutes. You're only going to get them for a very short amount of time.
Or a mom with 3 kids and maybe one that has a neurodivergent need and maybe one that's trying to balance life. And
exactly.
She's probably not sitting down and watching 30, 45 minutes of YouTube.
No, absolutely not. And in fact, a couple of years ago, Instagram released Reels, right? To compete with TikTok. Now, prior to that, in stories where most of my people hung out, I could do a video of myself that was, myself talking to my audience, 15 seconds, a minute, things like that, and had plenty of people watching it. After the introduction of Reels, where people started to get videos in 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds. 15 minutes of watching a videos in stories became a long time. And all of a sudden, people stopped watching stories. And it's been true ever since then that I rarely will post a 15-second anything in stories because I know people's attention span is much more like 6 to 7 seconds of watching a video. So I think it's really tricky when we're thinking about educating people, when we're talking to people, to capture their attention for quite a bit of time is very difficult. And it depends on the medium, of course. But in my program now, parents are maxing out with a 5 to 10 minute video. That's too long now. And so we constantly are finding new ways to meet parents where they're at with small drips of information over time. That's really relevant and worth their time.
Do you find that the programs that you're creating now with these small drips of information, is it like a topic area is broken up many times and it's repetitive? Does it change a little bit? How is that content sort of absorbed to the point to where you're starting to see behavior change within these families, the parents and even the kids?
Yeah, so I think families want to change. I want to change. I want to change things all the time. And it's not until I've heard messages a couple times that I am willing to actually consider making that change. It's not that I'm not willing to, really. It's just that there's a lot of things going on. And it takes a bunch of, saying things and hearing things for me to be like, oh, I could actually do that myself. So when I think about this on social media, I rarely talk about something. I rarely do a series of something. Like, I'm not going to say, okay, we're going to talk about fiber for the next 4 weeks, because you might be interested in fiber once. You might be interested in fiber 2 days in a row, but do you really want to hear about fiber 3 days in a row? Probably not. You're going to lose interest because you have a whole bunch of other options on your For You page or your Explore page or whatever, giving you novel things that you haven't thought about for a long time. So when we are presenting education, often it's like, okay, we're going to talk about the vegetable group now. And then we spend 4 weeks on vegetables. You've lost people, right? I would lose my audience so fast in terms of their attention. Instead, if I talk about fiber today and I talk about your child's relationship with food and preventing disordered eating tomorrow, and then I talk about how to handle candy, and then I talk about how awesome broccoli is, and then I talk about this really fun toothpick magic where if you stick a toothpick in just about anything, kids will eat it. If I talk about a variety of things, I'm going to keep people more engaged. It's like, oh, what's she going to talk about today? We forget that we as a society now get bored easily. And if we were in school 10, 15, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, however long it's been since school, we learned a totally different way of communicating that does not align with who people are now and how they learn and what their attention spans are.
Do you think that it's because also everyone's not a one size fits all? So many different topics may relate to different audiences. Do you think that that's also part of it?
I think that's part of it. Also, I think people don't hate learning stuff that's not directly relevant to them if it's interesting and engaging and that sort of thing. So it can be mixed together. So we can speak to a group of people. So I speak to parents of kids who are, roughly 0 to 10, but we're also getting into the teens. So I'm talking to those parents, and not all of those parents have the same issues across the board with feeding their kids, but they can all find enough of something that they get it. And I think there's also this element that parents know now that there's stuff that they don't know. And the older your kid gets, the more you realize, hey, my kid could get something. My kid could have a problem that I'm not expecting. What am I going to do then? So I don't really hate learning things now about kids because I don't know when that information is going to become useful to me. I have parents coming back to me all the time now who are like, I followed you when, my kids were little and now they're a little older. And all of a sudden this is making sense, what you've been saying relating to, candy or continued exposure or whatever. So I think there's also this element of like parent understanding what I'm learning now from you might actually serve me well later. And I think when it comes to education though, where we're talking about, parents also being neurodivergent, if we're tackling a specific issue, so let's say I'm tackling extreme picky eating in my program, something that had not occurred to me until this summer, which is incredible to me, is we know that kids who are neurodivergent are more likely to have eating challenges. We know that. But what had not occurred to me is that means that the parents of those kids are also more likely to be neurodivergent. Now, I knew that these eating challenges have strong genetics. Some of them are highly heritable, just like ADHD is, or just like autism is, or things like that. But it never really clicked for me that if you're trying to help a parent who has a neurodivergent child with an eating problem, we need to create a program for a neurodivergent parent. They may or may not be neurodivergent, but if you're creating something for a neurodivergent parent, it's going to be simpler, it's going to be clearer, it's going to be easy to follow. So that means it's going to be easier for all parents, but it's going to be accessible to a parent who's got that kid with the eating challenges. And nobody at any point of all my education, I've read so many research papers, I can't even tell you. Never has it come out that like maybe we should really be thinking about how parents are neurodivergent here and creating resources for them. Never. Not once.
Wait a minute. So what you're saying is that we've always tried to create this content or these programs for getting children to eat better and stop being picky eaters and how we can combat these issues. But unintentionally, what we're realizing is we also need to be empathetic to these parents. These parents have a lot going on. And because of not everyone has the same issues and there's all these other variables in people's lives. Is that what we're saying here? Is that there's almost this switch to being even more empathetic to the families?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we must either be those families and own our own lived experience, or getting to know families well enough that we really understand. Unless you have had a child with an eating problem or stood in a pediatrician's office when they said, oh, hey, your kid's not gaining enough weight. Talk to any parent who has had that experience. They may start crying in that moment. I have seen parents just instantly, you talk about that moment with them and they are back in it. The idea that your child is not doing okay and maybe failing to thrive is just sickening, right? And so unless you've had that experience, unless you have somebody close to you, unless you've gone out of your way to learn that, if you either don't have kids or you had kids, but it was so long ago, there's so many reasons why you might not kind of be in touch with that. You can't create a program that's going to meet them where they're at. And you can't create a program that is going to speak to families in a way that they'll actually be able to change, because I'm not going to trust you, just me as a person. So as an example, I've been in a debate with my publisher about the name of my book that's going to be coming out. And I think the name is, I don't know, it feels a little judgy to me. Like, I don't feel great when I hear this title. Meanwhile, my publisher is like, we've got a great pulse on like what's judgmental and what's not. Now, my publisher is a mom and about my age and has a child, but based on my understanding from her child actually eats really well. And she hasn't had some really serious feeding problems. But I stood in the pediatrician's office and was the one who got told that my kid was really in a challenging situation. So I think there's this element of, if you haven't experienced it or gone out of your way to learn what it's like to experience it, you're not going to be able to communicate it to that group of people. But I think every time we communicate with a parent, like every time I'm writing, am I thinking about the parent who's doing really well? The answer is no, I'm not. I'm sitting there, I'm thinking about the struggling parent. In fact, I have a pretty substantial training series that I make anybody who writes for me go through, how to understand research, how to actually write in a way that is compassionate and empathetic while still communicating that research. And I make it really clear in that we are not writing for the parents who are doing really well. They have plenty of resources out there. We are writing for the parent who has a struggle, who does have those moments where they're like, gosh, I am not doing a good job feeding my kid because they're struggling, or I'm doing my best and that's good. And also I really want to make some improvements. So that's who we write for. That's who we talk to, but we do so in a way that is very empowering. We don't say, oh, you really need to do family dinners. We don't say that. What we do say is family dinners can be great for so many people. And if that's not accessible to you, here's a list of other things you can do.
Right. We talk about that a lot in public health marketing as well, is that sometimes when people want to be so equitable in their messaging or campaigns, they can sometimes actually be inequitable because they're creating such broad strokes. They're trying to be empathetic, but they forget about not everyone can do that thing. But here are some other things that you can do. And what really hit home for me, what you said is these parents can sometimes feel guilty. They feel like they're failing at being good parents. People know that they want to make change. They're not, I don't know any parent that's like, oh, I don't want to help my child. Like that's not a thing. Right. And so being a little bit more understanding of it's not the one thing we need to talk about that may apply to some, but here are some other things to consider. I think that's super important, right? It's like this change doesn't happen overnight because we say this one thing over and over again.
Right. And I think what's tricky, especially when we're thinking public health, is I think we need to be out there promoting family meals and really pushing people. Like I dedicated a whole chapter in my book to it. And here's the thing. My husband and I, we have moved mountains to make family meals happen in our house. We've gone to extreme length to make this happen. At the same time, I'm not going to expect that every other family can or wants to do that. Right. And that's okay. There's so many other powerful things you can do. So I don't think we always have to dilute the message, which is what can happen where we're like, oh, well, I'm scared to make any recommendations. I don't think we have to do that. We could still on a bus wrap, put a family eating around a table, laughing together and say, sit down and have a meal with your family. That is powerful. Those images are powerful. And we can also be doing other messages out there. That's like, okay, if family dinners don't work for you, let's read a book together when we have a moment on a Wednesday morning or whatever it is. I think it's okay for messages to be targeted. I just think in our portfolio of messages, it's important that we are acknowledging limitations at the same time, where we're both pushing people, but also granting people accommodation. And it's always that balance. We're pushing people and ourselves to do better. And also we're saying sometimes we just can't do it. So we need an accommodation here. We need another alternative.
I think that's a really good message of how we can empower people to think differently about when they're creating content or creating programs, still being able to do that, but be a little bit more, and like you said, intentional about those different messages and making sure that they're reaching different audiences for different reasons. And then creating that content in smaller sections so that people can digest it over time.
It's also in the words that we use. We can say, family meals will help your child. That is, wow, you are brave to say that because you have no idea what's going to happen if they do that. Also, they may not be able to even have family meals to see what's going to happen. There's so much. But if you say family meals can help your child,
that's a completely different message.
That's a different message. Or you could say family meals may help your child. Okay, well, that's a different statement together. You can also say, what if family meals could help your child? And now you introduce a totally different mindset where you're like, that's interesting. What if I did that? You've put the curiosity on them. You've put them in a different headspace of, I can try new things. And if it doesn't work, it's not necessarily on me. But also, if it does work, what a win. And so I think it's sometimes in those little words that we can introduce this idea of giving people space to experience real life and empathy and not putting guilt on them, but also giving them the idea that they can do things differently.
Giving them the space. I like how you said that. It's adding a little bit of grace to the idea of your messaging, which I don't think we always think about that, but that's such a powerful approach, is understanding the grace as well as your intentionality. And that helps to provide that empathy a little bit more. That was a big aha moment for me. That's actually really fascinating. You know, we have all these different people, whether they're educators, public health professionals, community members, people that work in medical professions. How do we empower them to think differently in the way that you have done in terms of content and messaging and this idea of empathy and grace? How do we empower people to do that?
It has to be an intentional decision on the part of the individual. You have to want it, because there's actually some funky research out there that shows like when people go through a hard time, sometimes they have less empathy because now they know you can be okay on the other side. And so as people are going through this hard time, they're like, I did it. I got through feeding my kid. Or, you talk to any one of the grandparents now and they're like, oh, you just ate whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that's not how I remember. I just ate whatever. But you have to have an intentional willingness to listen to people and what they're going through now, to really listen to their stories. Doesn't matter what part of your job that you're doing, get out there and meet the people that you're serving. There's no way around that. There's no way around actually meeting the people you're serving, whether that's you take up a volunteer thing or you go out of your way to meet some people at a community event, whatever it is, you have to go meet people. You have to meet them enough that you can have a conversation with them. Or you need to really go out of your way to be listening to these voices online. Every community has a channel out there. And if you want to reach them in small, short chunks of information, you have to go be on social media.
You have to be on social media.
You have to do it. You don't have to consider it part of your job. Do it while you're at work. Like, pitch it to your boss. It's important for me to scroll social media, the people that we're serving, to find out what they are seeing, what they are listening to, how they are learning. Because unless you can kind of do that, you're just not going to get it. You're just not going to get how to do it. But it's got to be really intentional. Really intentional. You have to want that.
And hit a lot of important parts within that broad stroke, right? It's not just like fiber. Like, it's got to be more than just fiber.
Always has to be more than just fiber.
Always has to be more than just fiber.
At least add on some fluid to that.
At least add on, and maybe some sugary beverages, right? To the point I think that's really important is that in order to hit that empathy, in order to hit that grace, in order to hit that intentionality of this content, though, you have to meet people where they are by listening and understanding the storytelling within that. I think that's super powerful, because a lot of times people just create for the sake of creating. And we talk a lot here about the seat at the table, and literally just some of the last episodes is you can have the seat at the table, but are you actually allowing people to speak at that table? And then are you allowing people to be a part of the journey of this content as it evolves while they're at that table? It doesn't stop there. The storytelling has to continue with their involvement.
Yeah, it's so true. And I just want to put in one plug for personal development. You can believe all this academically. I have my bachelor's degree was in cultural anthropology, where all we talked about was how other people think, how to understand what people think. And that's great. And that's important. We can talk about the seat at the table. People can learn and be like, oh, rah, I'm going to bring them to the table. I'm going to do the thing. But if you want empathy, which is what will actually change your message in the end, you have to do your own soul searching and realize your own biases, your own privileges that you have. You have to be willing to go back to the place that's really uncomfortable, where you are listening to stories that are really, really uncomfortable. You don't want to be there. You're going back to the hardest times that you've had in your life, and you're writing while you're in that mindset. This sort of thing is like, it's not just academics. It's not just doing your job. It's also who you are emotionally as a person, spiritually as a person. Like, those sorts of things actually come into play here. And so you have to work on yourself as you are creating this content. Otherwise, it's just going to come off as, it's just not going to come off at the same place.
It's not going to be intentional. Yeah, it's not.
That's
you have to include your own intentionality and the grace within yourself to really get uncomfortable. That's such a powerful message. I 100% agree.
That's right.
My therapist tells me to do that all the time.
Yeah.
Jennifer, I really appreciate it. Everyone, please go and take a peek at this content that Jennifer is reading at kids.eat.in.color on Instagram and kidseatincolor.com. Check out these amazing programs that Jennifer and her team are creating, these incredible strategies and approaches to see actual change within our communities and getting kids and parents to live healthier lives. Jennifer, thank you so very much. This was such a great conversation. I really enjoyed our time today.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much.
If there's one thing to take away, it's that shifting behavior doesn't come from perfect messaging. It comes from honest connection. When we speak with empathy, listen first, and meet people where they are, our messages don't just inform, they move. Because the only way we can make real change, build trust, and serve our families is if we do it together. If you enjoyed today's conversation, we'd really appreciate you hitting that 5-star review. Thanks as always to the Virginia Foundation for Healthy Youth and Prevention Connections for their continued support. Now go out there, go do good, everybody. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.